Rain hammered against the window panes like angry fists that night in London, 1837. Elena Hayes stood frozen in the dim glow of a single candle, the letter trembling between her fingers. Only 2 lines. Cold, precise. Unsigned except for the heavy wax seal of the Duke of Thornberry. I require a portrait painter for my family. Come to Thornberry Hall. No one must know. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The Duke of Thornberry, the man they called the Ice Duke, the reclusive noble whose very name made debutantes whisper and matrons clutch their pearls. She should have burned the letter. She should have laughed at the arrogance of it. Instead, she read those 2 lines again and again. Because downstairs her father sat with his head in his hands, bills piled like accusations on the table. And upstairs, her younger sister Lily cried softly into her pillow, terrified of the marriage their uncle had arranged to a cruel debt-ridden baron twice her age. Elena closed her eyes. The scent of wet London streets drifted through the cracked window. She had talent. She had pride. But tonight, pride would not pay the creditors or save her sister. So she whispered to the empty room, voice shaking, "I'll go." 3 days later, the carriage wheels crunched over the gravel drive of Thornberry Hall under a sky the color of slate. The great stone mansion rose before her like a sleeping giant, its towers cutting into the low clouds, every window dark except one faint light high in the west wing. A silent footman took her single trunk. Another led her through endless corridors that smelled of polished oak and old secrets. No welcome. No introductions. Only the echo of her own footsteps. They stopped before a heavy oak door. "Your studio, miss," the footman said, and left her alone. Elena stepped inside. The room was large, cold, and perfect. North light poured through tall windows. Fresh canvases waited. The finest paints and brushes she had ever seen lay arranged with military precision. On a small table sat a pot of steaming tea and a plate of lemon biscuits with lavender icing, her favorite, though she had never told a soul outside her family. A chill ran down her spine. How could he know she worked alone for 3 days? No one disturbed her. The Duke never appeared. Yet every morning, small things changed. A new book of poetry left beside her chair. Wordsworth opened to the page she had once lingered over in a shop window months ago. A cashmere shawl draped over the stool when the room grew too cold. Hot chocolate appeared at dusk exactly the way she liked it, dark with a whisper of cinnamon. And always the feeling of being watched. On the 4th evening, as shadows lengthened across the floor, the door opened without a knock. Logan Caldwell strolled in all golden charm and easy smile, the complete opposite of everything she had imagined about his elder brother. "Well, well," he drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "So this is the mysterious artist my brother has hidden away. You're even lovelier than the rumors suggested, Miss Hayes." Elena stiffened, brush hovering above the canvas. "Lord Caldwell." He stepped closer, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Call me Logan. And tell me, how does it feel to be the Duke's little secret? Does he even speak to you, or does he simply watch from the shadows, like the gargoyle everyone says he is?" His words stung, because they were true. Damon Caldwell had not uttered a single word to her since her arrival. Not once. She had glimpsed him only twice. Tall, dark, motionless, at the end of a hallway. Gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then he was gone. She forced her voice steady. "I was hired to paint my lord, not to entertain guests." Logan laughed softly. "Careful little painter. My brother collects beautiful things, but he never keeps them. When he grows bored, he discards them without a word. I'd hate to see that happen to you." He left a single red rose on her table before walking out. Elena stared at the flower until the petals blurred. Humiliation burned in her chest. She was not a toy for two brothers to fight over. She was here for money, for Lily, for survival. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered the dim corridors, candle in hand. She told herself she was only exploring the house, but deep down she knew she was searching for answers. Her feet carried her to a small, forgotten sitting room at the end of the east wing. The door was ajar. Inside, moonlight spilled across an old writing desk. A single drawer stood slightly open. Elena hesitated, then slid it further. A bundle of letters tied with black ribbon rested there. The top envelope bore her own name, Elena Hayes, in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. Beneath it lay yellowed pages covered in the same strong hand. She unfolded one. Her latest watercolor arrived today. The light on the water is extraordinary. She captures what others only see. If only she knew how long I have watched her talent bloom from afar. Elena's fingers tightened on the paper. The date was 3 years old. Her breath trembled. He had known about her. Not for weeks. For years. The Ice Duke had been following her quiet, hidden career long before that rain-soaked night in London. Long before the 2-line letter that had dragged her into his silent, shadowed world. She pressed the letter to her chest, heart pounding with a terrifying mixture of fear and something dangerously close to hope. Outside, the wind howled around Thornberry Hall as if warning her. But Elena Hayes, standing alone in the moonlight with secrets in her hands, already knew one truth. She was no longer just a painter, and the Duke of Thornberry was no longer just a stranger. The days at Thornberry Hall settled into a strange, hushed rhythm. Elena rose before dawn, crossed the cold corridor to her studio, and lost herself in paint. The family portrait grew slowly under her brush stern ancestors, with gray Caldwell eyes staring down from the canvas. But it was not their faces that haunted her. It was his. She began to notice the small, silent ways Damon revealed himself. He never entered the room that had once belonged to his mother. Elena had seen the door, only once dark oak carved with climbing roses, forever closed. When she asked a maid about it, the girl turned pale and hurried away without answering. He also avoided light. Every lamp in the great hall was kept low, every curtain drawn halfway, as if the Duke feared that too much brightness might expose the cracks beneath his icy surface. One gray afternoon, while mixing pigments, Elena felt the air change. She looked up. Evelyn Caldwell, the Dowager Duchess, stood in the doorway like a queen of winter. Silver hair, swept high, black silk gown, severe eyes, the same piercing gray as her grandson's. So the old woman said, voice sharp as cut glass, "You are the girl my grandson has hidden in my house." Elena set her brush down carefully, heart hammering. "Your Grace." Evelyn stepped inside, gloved hands folded. "A painter, from a family of no consequence. Tell me, Miss Hayes, do you truly believe you belong here?" The words landed like stones in still water. Elena lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. "I was invited, Your Grace. I paint what I am paid to paint." A cold smile touched Evelyn's lips. Invited. How quaint. My grandson collects strays the way other men collect horses. Be careful you do not become another ornament he tires of and forgets. She turned and left the scent of lavender and old pride lingering behind her. That evening, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, fighting tears. The walls felt closer, the silence heavier. She was beginning to feel like exactly what the Dowager had called her, a secret, a convenience, nothing more. A soft knock broke the stillness. A young woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile entered carrying a tray. "Miss Hayes, I'm Clara Whitfield. His Grace asked me to assist you while you work here." Clara's voice was kind, steady. Over the next days, she became the first real warmth Elena had felt since arriving. She listened without judgment when Elena spoke of her worries for Lily. She brought small comforts, fresh flowers inked for letters home, and quiet encouragement when doubt crept in. "You have fire in you," Elena Clara said one night as they sat by the fire. "Don't let this cold house put it out." But the rumors began anyway. Lord Victor Ashford arrived for a brief visit, all polished charm and sharp ambition. Within hours, whispers slithered through the servants' halls, and beyond, the Duke was keeping a beautiful young artist locked away in his private wing. His secret mistress, his latest indulgence. Elena overheard two maids whispering in the corridor. Her cheeks burned with shame. She waited 3 long days for Damon to speak, to deny it, to protect her name. He never did. The silence from him cut deeper than any words could have. One rainy evening, Elena stood before her easel, no longer painting the Caldwell ancestors. Instead, she painted herself, eyes shadowed with doubt, shoulders heavy with unspoken pain. The brush moved almost against her will, pouring out every fear, every ache of feeling invisible. She was so lost in the work that she didn't hear the door open. Dr. Nathaniel Reed stepped inside, quietly, medical bag in hand. He was an old friend of Damon's, the only man who seemed unafraid to speak truth to the Duke. He glanced at the canvas, then at Elena's tired face. "Miss Hayes," he said gently, "you are not the only one carrying weight in this house." Later that night, through a half-open library door, Elena caught fragments of their conversation. "You cannot keep hiding behind silence," Damon Dr. Reed said, voice low and urgent. "Imlang, qua lausigia chetka, hengoi? She is not one of your ledgers. She has a heart, and you are breaking it without even speaking." Damon's reply was too quiet to hear. The next morning, Elena packed her trunk. Her hands shook as she folded her dresses. Enough. She would not stay where she was treated as a secret and a scandal. She would find another way to save Lily. She was nearly at the front door when she stopped. Something was different. Her easel, which had cracked yesterday when she accidentally knocked it, now stood perfectly repaired. The broken leg had been mended with careful invisible joints. Fresh paints waited in neat rows. A single white rose rested against the palette. No note, no explanation. Just that small silent act. Elena stared at the repaired easel for a long moment, throat tight. Tears stung her eyes. She set her trunk down slowly. She was still here. But the doubt remained sharp and heavy in her chest, whispering that perhaps the Duke's walls were too high, and her heart too fragile to survive them. The final brushstroke trembled on the canvas. Elena stepped back, breathing hard, as the grand family portrait stood finished before her. The Caldwell ancestors stared out with their cold gray eyes, but it was the empty space in the center that haunted her. Most, the place where Damon should have been painted, yet somehow never quite appeared. She wiped her hands on a rag and turned to leave the studio. Needing air, needing distance from the weight of unspoken things. That was when she heard the voices. Low. Tense. Coming from the half-open door of the library. "You swore to Father on his deathbed." Logan's voice cut through the quiet sharp with triumph. "You promised you would never marry, never risk putting a woman through what Mother suffered. Her depression, his indifference. You said you would rather die alone than repeat that hell." Elena froze in the corridor, blood turning to ice. Damon's reply was barely audible, rough and strained. "That was years ago, Logan. Yet here you are." Logan continued, keeping this girl hidden like some precious secret, painting her way into your life while you give her nothing but silence. You're using her to fill the emptiness, brother, just like Father used Mother until she broke. Each word sliced deeper than the last. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle the sound rising in her throat. All the small kindnesses, the repaired easel, the favorite biscuits, the books left open to pages she loved. Suddenly, they felt like chains made of velvet. A way to keep her close without ever promising her a future. She had let herself hope. And now that hope lay shattered at her feet. The rain had begun again, heavy and relentless by the time she found him. Damon stood alone in the rose garden coat, dark with water hair plastered to his forehead. He did not turn when she approached. "How dare you?" Elena whispered voice, breaking through the downpour. "How dare you make me believe I mattered? All this time, the silence, the gifts, the watching, it was never about me. It was about you. Filling your lonely little world without ever risking your precious vow." Rain streamed down her face, mixing with hot tears she could no longer hold back. Damon finally looked at her. Those gray eyes, usually so cold, now held raw, naked pain. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Only silence. The same terrible, suffocating silence that had both drawn her in and destroyed her. Elena's chest heaved. "Say something. For once in your life, say something." He took one step toward her hand, lifting as if to touch her cheek, then dropped it. The rejection in that single gesture broke what remained of her heart. "I'm leaving in the morning," she said, voice trembling, but final. "I won't stay here and be your ghost. I won't let you use my heart to heal wounds you refuse to name." She turned and walked away through the storm, leaving him standing alone among the rain-soaked roses. Clara found her later that night, curled on the window seat in her room, eyes swollen. "You are worth more than his silence, Elena," Clara whispered, holding her hands. "You have talent. You have strength. You have a sister who needs you whole, not broken by a man who cannot speak his own truth." Dr. Nathaniel Reed came the next morning. He sat quietly beside her as she packed the last of her things. "Sometimes the strongest men are the most terrified of feeling," he said gently. "But that doesn't make the pain they cause any less real. You owe it to yourself to walk away, if staying cost your soul." Elena nodded, though every movement felt heavy. She had learned a brutal lesson. Actions without words were only beautiful lies. Her trunk was already loaded onto the carriage when Evelyn Caldwell appeared at the top of the grand staircase. The Dowager Duchess looked older in the morning light, her usual sharpness softened by something almost like regret. "Before you go, child," she said, pressing a small wooden box into Elena's hands. "Take this. It belongs to you now, whether you stay or leave." Elena hesitated, fingers tracing the carved lid. Inside lay a thick bundle of letters, all written in Damon's strong hand. None of them had ever been sealed or sent. She unfolded the top one with shaking fingers. Her latest painting arrived yesterday. The way she uses light, it breathes. She has a courage I have never possessed to create beauty even when the world offers her so little. I watch her from afar because I do not know how to stand close without breaking her the way my father broke my mother. Tears blurred the ink. Letter after letter. Year after year. He had loved her talent, her quiet strength, her resilience. Long before the shadowed invitation, long before the walls and the silence. Elena clutched the box to her chest, heart splintering in 100 different directions. The carriage waited. The rain had eased to a soft drizzle. She stood on the gravel drive, torn between the pain of betrayal and the devastating truth now resting in her hands. Damon had never used her. He had simply been too afraid to love her out loud. And now, she no longer knew which truth hurt more. London welcomed Elena with noise and soot and relentless rain. She found a small sunlit room above a bookshop in Mayfair and turned it into her studio with Clara Whitfield's quiet help. Within weeks, orders began to arrive modest, at first, then steadily more. Ladies wanted their daughters painted in soft pastels. Gentlemen requested hunting scenes and portraits of their favorite horses. Elena worked from dawn until the candles burned low her brush, moving with fierce determination. Yet, every night when the city quieted, she sat alone on the narrow bed and opened the wooden box. Damon's unsent letters lay inside like fragile secrets. She read them until the words blurred, then closed the lid again, heart aching with a pain that refused to fade. Some nights she whispered to the empty room, "Why couldn't you just say it?" Damon Caldwell had never left Yorkshire in winter. Until now. The journey to London felt endless, the carriage wheels churning through mud as gray as his mood. For the first time in his life, the Duke of Thornberry stepped into the noisy streets of the capital, not as a ruler, but as a man, terrified of losing the only woman who had ever made his silence feel like a cage. He did not send flowers or pretty notes. Instead, he acted. One by one, he bought every painting Elena had for sale, paying double the asking price without hesitation. He arranged for them to hang in the most exclusive gentlemen's clubs and drawing rooms across Mayfair, each piece accompanied by a small card that read simply, "By Elena Hayes." At the same time, quietly and without her knowledge, he settled the last of the Hayes family debts. The creditors received their money. The threatening letters stopped. Lily's unwanted engagement quietly dissolved. Elena only knew that suddenly the weight on her father's shoulders seemed lighter. She did not know why. Dr. Nathaniel Reed found Damon standing alone in a shadowed corner of White's Club, staring at one of Elena's landscapes. "You're running out of time," my friend the doctor said without preamble. "If you keep hiding behind your silence, you will lose her forever. She deserves to hear the truth from your own mouth, not guess it from your actions." Damon's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "What if my truth only hurts her more?" "Then at least she will hurt with honesty," Reed replied gently, "instead of bleeding from uncertainty." The Dowager Duchess arrived in London 3 days later. Evelyn Caldwell requested a private meeting with Elena in a quiet tea room overlooking Hyde Park. The old woman looked smaller away from Thornberry Hall, her usual armor of frost slightly cracked. "I was wrong about you, Miss Hayes," she admitted, voice low. "I saw only your lack of title and fortune. I did not see your strength." She paused, eyes distant. Damon watched his mother fade away year after year because his father could not or would not speak the words she needed to hear. The boy swore he would never do the same to any woman. But, in protecting you from his silence, he has only repeated the wound. Elena listened throat-tight, the unsent letters burning like fire in her memory. That same week, a small private exhibition was held in a modest gallery tucked behind Bond Street. Only a handful of guests had been invited. Elena attended reluctantly at Clara's gentle insistence. She stood before her newest self-portrait, the one she had painted in Thornberry Hall on the night her heart first broke, when a tall figure appeared beside her. Damon. He wore black, as always, but his shoulders carried a new tension. Rain still clung to the shoulders of his coat. His gray eyes, usually so controlled, were raw with emotion. For a long moment, he simply stared at the painting of her own shadowed face. Then in a voice low and rough trembling, with the weight of 20 years of restraint, he spoke. "I have been terrified of love since I was 12 years old. I watched my mother disappear inside herself because my father never told her she was enough. I swore I would never risk doing that to anyone." He turned to face her, fully voice cracking. "But then I saw your paintings, and later I saw you. Your courage, your quiet fire. And for the first time I wanted to break my own promise. I was too afraid to speak, Elena. So I tried to love you the only way I knew how, in silence, in small, careful gestures. I know now that it was not enough. I know I hurt you. And I am so deeply sorry." The words hung between them, raw and precious. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She searched his face for any trace of the old ice, but found only vulnerability and fear and desperate hope. She did not throw herself into his arms. She did not forgive him with pretty words. Instead, she gave one small, slow nod, then turned and walked out of the gallery into the cool London evening, leaving Damon standing alone before her painted sorrow. Later that night, back in her little studio above the bookshop, Elena sat on the floor surrounded by half-finished canvases. She cried deep shaking sobs that had been locked inside her for months, not from anger, not from betrayal, but from the heartbreaking realization that every silent gift, every repaired easel, every unsent letter had been Damon's clumsy, terrified attempt to love her the only way he knew how. And for the first time since leaving Thornberry Hall, she allowed herself to wonder, what might happen if the Ice Duke finally learned how to speak? 1 year later, spring had finally come to England. Elena Hayes was no longer the hidden painter of Thornberry Hall. Her name was spoken with genuine respect in London drawing rooms. Commissions filled her little studio above the bookshop, and her works now hung in some of the finest homes in Mayfair. Tonight, she stood beneath crystal chandeliers at the grand charity ball hosted by Sophia Peyton, wearing a gown of soft silver silk that caught the light like moonlight on water. She had come to paint a portrait for the evening's auction, a single sitting with a generous donor. She had not expected to see him. Damon Caldwell entered the ballroom quietly, as he always did. Tall, dressed in unrelieved black, the Duke of Thornberry still carried the same commanding presence. Yet something had changed. The ice in his gray eyes had thawed into something warmer, deeper, more alive. Their gazes met across the crowded room. Elena's heart gave one hard, painful lurch. Before she could turn away, Lord Victor Ashford's voice sliced through the polite conversation like a blade. How convenient, he announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear a cruel smile twisting his lips. The little artist who rose so quickly. One must wonder, did her talent alone secure such sudden success? Or was it a rather more personal connection with a certain reclusive duke? Whispers rippled through the ballroom. Fans snapped open. Eyes turned toward Elena. Heat flooded her cheeks. Old doubts stirred the same poisonous voices that had once made her feel like nothing more than a secret. But this time, Damon did not remain silent. He crossed the floor in long, deliberate strides and stopped beside her, his presence solid and unmistakable. Lord Ashford, he said, voice low, but carrying clearly through the sudden hush, you speak of things you do not understand? Damon turned to face the gathered guests, his hand lightly touching the small of Elena's back, not possessive, but protective. Miss Hayes's success belongs to her alone. Her talent is extraordinary. Her courage, her honesty, and her quiet strength are what I admire most in this world. Any man who tries to diminish her achievements will answer to me. Because the woman I love will never again be spoken of with disrespect. A stunned silence fell. Elena stared at him, breath caught in her throat. He had spoken, in front of everyone, without hesitation. Lord Ashford's face paled. He muttered something and retreated into the crowd. Damon looked down at Elena, eyes searching hers with raw vulnerability. I am still learning, he said softly only for her, but I will not hide anymore. Later, when the music swelled and the dancing resumed, Elena took his hand and led him away from the lights, through tall glass doors into the quiet garden. Moonlight silvered the paths. The air smelled of early roses and fresh earth. She stopped beneath an ancient oak and reached into the small satchel she had carried all evening. I painted this for you, she whispered. It took me most of the year. She unwrapped the canvas and turned it toward him. There he stood, Damon painted in the rose garden at Thornberry Hall. The roses were in full riotous bloom around him, pink and cream and deepest red. But it was his face that stole her breath. Even now, the hard lines softened the gray eyes, warm with quiet wonder, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. A man no longer frozen, a man learning how to feel. Damon stared at the painting for a long moment, throat working. Elena's voice trembled. I was so angry with you, so hurt, but every letter, every repaired easel, every silent gift, I finally understood. You were loving me the only way you knew how. And through your patience, through your stubborn, quiet persistence, I learned how to forgive, how to trust again. She took a shaky breath. I don't need perfect words, Damon. I only need you willing to try. He sank slowly to one knee on the soft grass, not in the grand tradition of grand proposals, but with simple, heartfelt reverence. I don't deserve you, he said, voice rough with emotion. But if you will have me, Elena, I want to spend the rest of my life learning to love you out loud, with words when I can find them, and with actions every single day. Let me stand beside you. Let me grow with you. Please. Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks. She reached out and touched his face, feeling the warmth of his skin, the faint tremble beneath her fingers. Yes, she whispered. We'll learn together. Spring returned to Thornberry Hall in a riot of color. The small ceremony took place in the gardens on a perfect April morning. Only a handful of people stood beneath the blossoming trees. Evelyn Caldwell, her sharp eyes softened with quiet approval. Clara Whitfield smiling through happy tears. Dr. Nathaniel Reed looking quietly proud. And Elena's family, her parents, and Lily, all of them finally free from old burdens. No grand spectacle. No hundreds of guests. Just love, simple and true. After the vows were spoken, Damon took Elena's hand and led her to a new section of the garden he had quietly prepared all winter. A wooden archway covered in climbing roses welcomed them. Beneath it, a small plaque had been placed. Elena's garden. This is yours, he said softly, voice warm with promise. Every rose here will bloom because of the light you brought into my life. Elena leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder as the fragrance of roses wrapped around them both. In that quiet moment, surrounded by color and light and the people who had witnessed their long, painful journey, she understood the deepest truth of all. Real love does not always begin with grand declarations or perfect words. Sometimes it begins in silence. Sometimes it grows through fear and doubt and small, stubborn acts of care. And sometimes, with patience, with courage, and with the willingness to heal old wounds together, that quiet love blooms into something breathtakingly beautiful, and it lasts. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully only to support production while keeping human supervision over editing emotional tone and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.